This is the Hope Not Nope podcast,
where we answer your questions and share inspirational stories to fill your soul with hope.
Our mission is to empower hope to those who have been plagued by nope.
I'm Dr. Dylan Caswell.
And I'm Brandy.
And we're here to bring you out of the nope and into hope.
Welcome back to the next episode of the Hope Not Nope podcast. We are so excited that you are listening and thrilled to be with you. At the beginning of each episode, we share our hope stories. And my hope story, kind of simple, but Dylan's been having weekly breakfasts with his best friend. And I just love that because it makes me remember when I was in high school and there were these old men that would come to the diner that I was a waitress at every Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple guys that would come every day, like they're the regulars, but then there was a group of guys that would all get together, order the exact same thing every single Tuesday. And it makes me happy because it's like the old man thing. Yeah. And it's simple, but I love that Dylan and his best friend are doing that. Not that they're old men, but that they're prioritizing quality time with each other. And it makes me happy. And I think that it makes me, as well as I hope it makes you, ask yourself, how can I prioritize, weekly or bi-weekly time with my friends or with my family? I know, some people, they call their mom or their dad every single day. Some people call every Saturday. I have a friend who I have bi-weekly calls scheduled with so that we, live 5 hours away from each other, but it allows us to continue to be a support to one another during our lives. And so I just love that you and your friend have breakfast. It makes me so happy.
So background, during the shutdown of COVID in 2019, 2020, we spent every day together, like 10 to 12 hours a day. And then, he started to go back to work. I started to pick up more patients and clients because sports were happening again. And so we kind of lost all this time and we both felt a little sad about it. And as time has gone on, there's so many excuses to not get together. And the biggest one is that, there's just not enough time in the week. Mm-hmm. I don't have enough energy. We get together for breakfast. It's half an hour, like timer set. Mm-hmm. And when the timer goes off, it's done. And then we reconvene the next week. But we both look forward to it because in that half hour, we're catching up. Hey, what happened last week? How you doing? What do you got coming up that you're excited about? How can I support you as a friend? Mm. It's not the 10 to 12 hours that we had, but it's what's doable in our current circumstances in life right now. Mm-hmm. And it's so awesome. And we missed a couple weeks because of traveling. And then we realized that we can do it virtually. Aww. So now we're never missing one. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. Hop on, get some food. I'll have some food. We can chat for half hour. Mm-hmm. We prioritize it. And when you prioritize it, you make the time for it, mm-hmm. right? Some other things might need to be sacrificed, but it's worthwhile. Prioritize it, and it's awesome. So mm-hmm. definitely do that.
Yeah, 10-10 recommend.
As much as you can. Mm-hmm. My hope story starts with a fist bump. So give me a fist bump. If you're watching, you saw that. If you're not watching, we did a fist bump. And the reason being is that there was this really funny study that came out that followed NBA teams. I don't know the specifics of how long they followed them for, but what they found is that teams that fist bump, high five, slap each other on the back, sometimes on the butt, but these teams that support each other end up playing better. What's tricky from that research is that maybe they're celebrating more because they were playing better. So maybe playing better brought on the fist bumps and the things like that. Or it could be that the fist bumps, the pats on the back, then elevated their game. Like, we don't know. And that wasn't able to be teased out, and it is correlational. But it made me really excited because personally, I feel like a fist bump goes such a long way. Mm-hmm. A pat on the back goes such a long way.
You're a big high five guy.
I love high fives.
And dabs.
Mm-hmm. Love them. Do not go around touching people on the butt, saying good game. Like, save that specifically for teammates. But a fist bump, a high five, a pat on the back goes so far in performance. Mm-hmm. So that's my hope story. And I guess the challenge for the week is just fist bump your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
Your wife does something awesome, fist bump. I thought I was going to say something different. Your kid does something incredible, like give them a high five and like have fun with it. Put your arm up really high so they have to run and jump it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing this video of this kindergarten class, and every day the kid gets elected to stand outside the class, and there's a chart that they get to point to, and when the other students get there, the elected student points to the chart. There's high five, fist bump, and hug.
Oh,
And the
I love
elected
that.
student gets to pick how each person gets to greet them that day. They get to pick a hug, a fist bump, a high five.
That's so
Watching
nice.
that video is so joyful. The excitement on the kids' faces, like every kid's waiting in anticipation, like, ooh, what am I going to get today? Am I the fist bump, the high five, or the hugger? And the kids, ooh, this one, you do this one, you do this one. And it's so joyful. Does it take time? Yeah. What, a minute and a half, 2 minutes? Like, these little things go such a long way. I know Craig Rochelle is a mentor leadership that we really look up to. And his whole mission is making better leaders. The whole team gets better when the leader gets better. His staff, he does this like gold star handout. Sometimes it's random, sometimes it's at the end of the week, but it's just being acknowledged of, hey, you did a really good job this week. Have a gold star. What does that gold star do? Does it lead to bonuses? Does it lead to more time off? No, but everybody loves a gold star. It's the thank you for recognizing me and acknowledging that I put a lot of hard work in this week. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for going the extra mile to go to the dollar store to get this gold star that will only stick on a surface for about 40 minutes. But you did that because you care about me. And here's the thing. We don't even need the gold star. Just fist bump. Just boom, put it there. High five. Right? It's all right there. It's so easy to do with your team. So challenge this week. Meetings, end of meetings, beginning of meetings, at some point, acknowledge someone on your team and embrace them with a high five. Maybe it's a chest bump. When I worked clinically, I used to have a person at the front desk that I would get in, and I was at that, I think like Monday, Wednesdays, and I was in the other clinic the other days of the week. But I would get in there, and he would get up out of his chair without us saying a word to each other, and we would just go and chest bump.
I love that.
When he moved on to a new position, and we had his like going away, I was honestly a little sad. It's like, I don't have a chest bump person.
Do you think if you ran into him at like Walmart or something?
That's how we greet each other. Yeah. Wherever I see him, in whether it's in public or like a formal situation, no, it's a chest bump. Yeah.
I'm just picturing like kind of like at the wedding when that song came on and just you see like all of your friends just like raise their glass and walk towards everyone.
Yeah.
I just picture like you being at a conference or in a crowd of like 200 people and you guys make eye contact from across the room and just like run towards each other, but instead of like embracing with a hug, you just chest bump and then both fall over because you're so excited.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it.
That's iconic.
Yeah.
I love those home stories. So yeah, challenge for the week is either go give someone in your life a chest bump, hug, high five, whatever, or start having weekly breakfast.
Think about it in fitness, right? Like you and I will be doing a workout. Let's take the Murph, for example, right? Where the group kind of gets split up a little bit. One group's coming back while the other group's going out, and you're running by, and that person, they don't say a word to you because they can't breathe. They're pretty exhausted and fatigued, but they run by, and in that state, they stick out their hand just to give you a light high five. How far does that go in motivating you to keep going?
When people miss the high five, it's so defeating, and I feel like that happens to me sometimes. I can acknowledge like the defeated feeling, and that goes away as soon as you get the actual like connection.
Yeah.
Or like the classic, even if you don't high five, but like the thumbs up. Yeah. It's like, this is a tangent, but you know the Jeep wave or the motorcycle wave? Like when you have a motorcycle and you're driving past another guy with the motorcycle and you can give the wave, or like Jeep Wranglers do that as well. You don't get to do that with a Honda CRV. I wish you did. You're in the Honda CRV club, but you don't really get to do that. Yesterday I was driving and I watched a city bus do it to another city bus. And I was like, yes.
Yeah.
Not that I'm a city bus driver, but like that's it. That is it.
Yeah, and it's hard when people don't know that you're trying to start the Honda CRV wave
Yeah.
because they just drive by and they're like, oh, that's the same car. Why is she doing that to me? And you're like, no, I'm trying to start something new and cool for us.
Yeah.
Like, join in and do this with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Luckily, I do have a couple friends with Honda CRV, so at least we can wave to each other.
Yeah.
Let's hop into our questions. Our first question is from a listener named Eli. I have relatives who were recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and the doctor said it's passed through genes. Can you expand on this, and do you have any suggestions on how I can prevent this personally?
I think the place to start, Eli, is that it's hard when a family member gets
Mm-hmm.
Alzheimer's and gets that diagnosis. It's again, a pretty scary diagnosis, and what can I do in this situation? I love the question that you're asking of, hey, am I at risk for this thing? And if so, what can I do to mitigate those risks? And I love that question. And honestly, it's part of my personal mission is, one side of my family, the thought is that you get to a certain age and you get dementia, and then that progresses and you get Alzheimer's and you end up passing because of these neurodegenerative types of conditions. And I always thought, like, that can't be it for all of us. Like, there has to be more to this. There has to be more things that we can do to prevent ourselves from getting these types of things. And when we look at the data, there is a lot showing that a lot can be done for this. And at the same time, like, people can do all the things that are quote unquote right, but still end up with a condition. And that's just kind of how it works. But the question of, is this passed down by genetics? I think genetics get so much credit
Mm-hmm.
because they're cool. It's fascinating. It sounds high tech. You can get all these genetic tests done now. There's a lot of money being made in um, genetic businesses. But again, if you talk to a genetic researcher versus a person that is making income off of genetics, you'll kind of get two different stories from it,
Mm-hmm.
that there's still a really long way to go. And what we can say from the research thus far is that genetics set the stage, but the environment will dictate what performance happens. So your family member has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Does that increase your risk of potentially having this when you're older? Yes. Is there a genetic factor that could play a role in that? We can't discredit that at this point. But what we do know is that even if you have a genetic predisposition to it, but you make the appropriate changes in your life for you as an individual, then your likelihood is really, really, really decreased, like almost completely mitigated. But we can't say that fully, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what can you do to potentially prevent Alzheimer's from being your future? And it gets down to what we have in the book of, it's simple but not easy solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the thing, you don't have to do anything like incredibly drastic. When we look at neurodegenerative diseases, what brings them on most of the time, when you look at their past patterns, is that genetics are blamed, but in reality, their sleep is pretty dumpy.
Mm-hmm.
They're not physically active through the day. Their internal load is incredibly high, and they don't have coping mechanisms for that internal load, right? Because you can have a high load, but if you have coping mechanisms, you're going to adapt, you're going to be fine. But when you don't have those coping mechanisms, that's when these things are going to start to pile up. So most things that we see with neural conditions, neurodegenerative conditions, it ends up being these plaques that are built up in the brain, and they're built up through time. And the tricky part is that once a person starts to show symptoms, it's usually pretty progressed in the disease process. So, we have to take control of these things before the symptoms start coming on. The reason sleep is such a big one is that when you're sleeping, your brain, your nervous system, as in your brain and your spinal cord, it does a car wash of cerebral spinal fluid and clears out all these plaques that you develop through the day, both from physical and emotional and all the, we'll just say, stressors. Your brain is working hard. There's byproducts that end up being there. The rest of our body has a lymphatic system that clears away the waste. Our brain does not have a lymphatic system. Our spinal cord doesn't have a lymphatic system. It uses cerebral spinal fluid to rush in there and clean out this stuff. So when does that happen? It happens during deeper stages of sleep. And most people are not getting to that as they get older, right? Once they get to be about 40 years old, they have all these responsibilities, family, work, and I don't know, name the list keeps going on. Their sleep starts to suffer. They're caffeinating a ton throughout the day. They're not physically moving. They don't feel fulfilled. They've lost who they are as a person. All these things add up. And then eventually they get to be 50, 60, 70 years old. And these symptoms start to come on. Oh, these symptoms, this looks like it could be dementia. This looks like it could be Alzheimer's. Well, dang, we should have taken care of this long before. And that's really what we want to do with Hope Not Nope is, hey, there's a lot of things that we can do to kind of change the trajectory of the suffering that we go through. Like everyone will suffer, right? But there's a lot of things that we can be doing to change what could happen to us in the future. So it's a great question, and I feel for you and your family member that got diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I've had multiple family members that have had that, and it's tough at times. It's, you know, they're breaking out of the nursing home and trying to go back and find their car. And you know, my great grandma and great grandfather, they'd break out, somehow get his car, and you know, they'd get caught like making out in their car and then have to get brought back in to the nursing home. So it's like these joyful things that were happening, but it's not joyful. Like there's glimpses of joy in it, but it's a hard condition. So my heart's there with you guys. I, you know, have been through that with family members, and it's challenging. It's challenging, but I love the question of what can I do so that this is not my future. And the biggest thing is take care of your sleep, make sure that you're physically moving, that you're active, that if your internal load is high, that you have optimal coping strategies for you so that you're getting to these deep stages of sleep where your body, your brain is using the cerebral spinal fluid to clean out these plaques so that they don't keep developing over time.
Yeah, the thing that came to my mind as you were sharing was the quote from the Global Leadership Summit this past year when they said, believe something new about yourself. And I think a lot of people, their relatives get diagnosed with this thing, or, you know, maybe they get diagnosed with this thing or whatever, and they believe that negative part, or they believe that diagnosis is the only option, or you know, take whatever and fill it into the blank, right?
Yeah.
But the truth is, believe something new about yourself. Believe that you can be well. Believe that you can honor your mind. You can honor your body. You can honor the rest that it needs, and you can also honor with the movement that it needs. And all these things are so important. And so I think at the end of the day, just believe something new about yourself, and also allow yourself to become the best person that you can become. You're not stuck with these diagnoses. You're not stuck with the genes that you have, or what have you. You are able to have a high quality life for your entire life. And I think that that's the hope that we want to give you today and give our listeners today.
Yeah, and adding on to that, remember the destination. Remember where you want your future self to be, because it's easy to start taking sleep away when you're building a career, when you have kids, and like all these things are happening. It's easy to go, yeah, no, I can get by with 5 hours of sleep. I can get by with 5.5 hours of sleep. So you sacrifice and you do that and you do that and you do that and you're fine until you're not. And then when that time comes when you're not, right? Like, oh man, you got 20 years of sleep to now make up for. And that's what's awesome about our system and our bodies, is that you can do that. But just because you can do that doesn't mean that you should do that, right? So protect your sleep. If you are sacrificing hours of sleep, make sure that it's definitely worth it. You know, in my opinion, that would be with a newborn baby.
Mhm.
with kids, like that's a great sacrifice to make for your kiddos. But if it's to go get that extra overtime hours when you're in a good spot and you don't really need to,
Mhm.
if it's I'm going to stay out the bar another 2.5 hours when you could be at home getting ready to go to sleep, like you have to understand that the sacrifices or the behavior that you're doing now will set up what's the play that's going to happen on that stage of genetics.
Mhm. And there's something to be said too, like there are times where you get 4 hours of sleep and then you have to do your entire next day,
Yeah.
and that just is what it is. You went to your favorite concert the night before, but the next day you have something important going on. At the end of the day, you're going to have moments where sleep is shorter, but don't get in the habit for the next 20 years of every single night you're getting
Yeah.
5 hours of sleep. We understand that there are certain circumstances. We understand that a newborn baby or even a toddler is not sleeping through the night, but hopefully you're not in that pattern for the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you have a kid every 2 years for the next 20 years, which could happen.
Right.
But
Right.
hopefully you can have a support system to help you in the midst of that as well. Let's hop into our next question. This is from Allison, and she says, "The brain is so powerful, which you highlight often within your book, Hope Not Note. How does a shift in mindset help someone in chronic pain?"
I think the first comment I need to make is that we have so many friends that are married to an Allison
We do.
that
Most of your best
most
friends
of
are
my
all
best
like,
friends.
their wives are Allie, Allison, Allie, but spelled differently.
Yeah.
When I came into the picture, my name wasn't Allison. I think they were all confused.
No, so I moved us to the B's.
Yeah.
So now we're in the B eras, and
That's true. You do have friends that have B's, and their wives start with B as well.
yeah. So we're moving along the alphabet. We'll just keep creating more friendships until we can get the whole alphabet.
There you go.
But Allison, I love that you said the brain is so powerful because it is. It's 3 pounds between our skull, and it is the heavyweight champion of the world at 3 pounds. It is incredibly powerful. It does everything for us. Where there's not something that the brain's not involved in. It's very, very powerful. So how does a shift in mindset help someone in chronic pain? I like the word mindset. I also kind of struggle with it a little bit because of how it could be interpreted. I think it's a hot word that people like because they can relate to it and they get what people are saying, like, oh, I need to change what's happening between my ears. But a lot of times when we hear the word like mindset, it could mean that you're it's inflexible. It's set, right? Because for example, in football, when you say the cadence, ready, set, hut, when you say set, no one's allowed to move at that point, right? So the word set sometimes kind of gets me a little
Grind your gears a little.
grinds my gears a little because you're not stuck. You're not there. The brain is more ready, right? We can still run motions, we can still call audibles, we can still do things from there. So if you're stuck in the set part, call a timeout, get a new play called in. But what I'm getting to with this is that our brain works by prediction. We used to not believe that, and we used to not have the science for that, but now the science is showing that it works by prediction. And there's a lot of powerful parts of the brain. And a lot of people will say, oh, this is the area for vision. This is the area for feeling. This is the area for motion. This is the area for fine tuning. This is the area for prediction, the cerebellum. Like all these things. Cool fun fact about the cerebellum, it means the little brain. It holds about 80% of the neurons in the entire brain. It's this little part of it. It does do some fine tuning, but it doesn't do it on its own. The brain is working together at all times to figure out what is the best outcome. Where should I send the hormones? Where should I send these things? Because I have to budget our energy, and I need to figure out when do I need this spike in the fight flight system? When are we able to get into more thriving and rest and digest? So the brain is constantly predicting, and it's not one structure of the brain, it's the entire brain. And there's a lot of neuroplasticity research that shows even when a brain area has been impacted or is no longer able to work from something like a stroke, that you can remap the brain in order to still use that area using different neurons and parts of the brain. So there are parts that are kind of in lead, but it relies on the whole team. The reason I say that is because people believe the triune brain, And that is now a psychological myth that there's not the triune brain. There's those parts of the brain, but it all works together to create our outcome. So pain is a prediction. Pain is an output. Sensory info comes up into the brain, goes through the thalamus. The thalamus goes to all these different areas in the brain to figure out what the heck is happening. The fight flight brain says, do we need to protect this? The brain goes, I don't really know what's happening yet, so go ahead and protect it. How does it protect it? I'm going to stiffen it up. I'm going to create the pain response. The brain starts searching, starts to go into more long-term processing. Have I been here before? What's the data on this? How do I become certain in an uncertain situation? Once it starts to get those things, then it goes, oh, okay, yeah, we don't need to be holding this area tightly anymore. Let's change the messages going to the muscle that's protecting that area. Let's change the sensory perception. Let's change the pain response. So once we start to know that and understand that about the brain, that it's prediction, then we can start to change the way that we interact with chronic pain, because we're not stuck with it. It's not set. It's ready, and it's ready to change. And at the end of the day, pain is a request for change. When we get that output of pain, it's our body, it's our mind, it's our spirit saying, you need to change something about what you're doing right now because it's not working. And when it's chronic pain, most of the time, these people have gotten these signals over and over and over, but they're just like push through kind of people. Like, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. Thank you for that signal, but nope, not going to take care of that. Thanks for the signal. Not in the right season to take care of it. Thank you for that signal, but nope, I don't want to do that change because it's really scary. So it just builds up over time, and eventually the sensory system, because we're sensory beings, we have a ton of sensory neurons. We feel our environment, we interact with our environment, but eventually the sensory system goes, well, if you're not listening to part of me, then I'm going to make you feel all of me. And then the brain gets overloaded and it goes, protect everything, protect it all, right? Fibromyalgia, different sensory components, different trigger points. It's your body protecting because it's afraid, because it's in fear. So when we shift our mindset over to learning that our brain works by prediction models, then we have a really good shot at calling the audible, as we can change what the prediction output's going to be by changing the input of what's coming in.
I love that. As you were talking, chronic means like continuous, right? It means something along the lines of like it's continually happening. And if we look at the word chronic in that definition, and then we look at the word pain and the definition that you gave of it's a request for change, that just means our body is in our like there's a constant request for change, which is beautiful, right? Like the only what's that one quote? The only consistent thing in life, or the only predictable thing in life, is change.
Oh, the only constant's change, Carol Dweck.
Yes,
in her book Mindset.
I didn't even know that. I couldn't have planned that if I tried. That's awesome. But yeah, so the only constant in life is change, and chronic pain is constant request for change. I think that's such a gift. But and I love the question and your description of mindset, because I think another thing you could say is, how does perspective help, right? But specifically, like I'm thinking of so many people in my life that has chronic pain, and they think that they're stuck with chronic pain. But how are you stuck with a thing that's literally asking you to change, right? And so I think inviting that definition into your heart and inviting that definition into your reflection and in your meditation might allow you to get to a place of like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Like how am I constantly being asked to change, and how is that a bad thing? Versus I don't know if this is making sense, but basically like we have the power to make that change. And I had chronic pain for nearly 10 years, like literally nearly 10 years. My late teens and almost all of my 20s were filled with chronic pain, and now I'm great. I am great. And it's because I made these changes that were being requested of me. And I needed support. I needed a proper framework. I needed hope as the greatest healing agent, I must say. But if I'm not, I mean, I'm special, but I'm not anyone special. Like everyone is special. Everyone has this opportunity. And my greatest desire is that people can truly just know that they don't have to live with their chronic pain. It's not this thing that's like not changeable. I don't know. I could go off on a tangent about it, but it's like you can change your life and it's great.
Yeah, I think you should go off on a tangent about it because it's so exciting and it's what we're passionate about. And this request for change, it's really, well, what's the request? Well, the request is that it wants meaningful activity back. And what's meaningful activity? Well, you don't know unless you know yourself, and you don't know yourself because you've gotten so far away from it, from all the stressors in the world. So there's barriers that need to be breaking down. But how do you break down those barriers? You break it down with love. You break it down with perspective. Well, where does the perspective come from? The perspective has to come from knowledge. Where does the knowledge come from? Well, it has to come from credible science.
Yeah.
And this is where we need to start looking at. And Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, oh gosh, I could go off on her work. It's incredible, but really her work has shown us how much our brain truly does work by prediction. Why we don't have this lizard brain that controls us. And people are like, well, I tried to do that, but the lizard made me do it. The lizard made me lose my temper. I'm Italian, and this is what Italians do. They hold grudges and they get angry and they get loud and they do this thing. And it's like, no, the only reason you're doing that is because you have a preconceived notion and perspective that that's how this works. But it doesn't, because you can train yourself to not react. You can train yourself to take a pause and go, you know what? I'm not going to reply to this statement or that remark right now because it's going to escalate the situation. And the best thing for me to do for myself and for this person in the conversation is to pause, take a break, digest it, process it, and then come back to it later. But we spend so much time thinking that, oh, the sooner I react, the sooner I get my way. And then it just adds on more and more, we'll call them micro traumas that build up and build up and build up over time. And then it gets to the point where your system's screaming at you because it's not who you are. It's not who you were intended to be. Oh, so many people I've worked with, the common thing they say is, I don't know who I am anymore. Right? Well, wow, what a great place to start.
Yeah.
By finding out that you're a person and you exist and that you have hopes and you have dreams and that you are incredible and that, you know, you've said some pretty nasty things and you've treated people really poorly. But at the time you didn't know any better. So now let's work on that. Let's work on that pause. Let's work on rediscovering that. And it's so cool when people do. I get to see people doing that through movement. I get to see people doing that through cognitive reframing. I get to see people doing that by just seeing themselves in a mirror as they're moving or as they're doing these other things. And the tears that come out of pure joy that then turn into, how the heck did I let this happen? It's such a beautiful journey for people. But just know, as Brandy was saying, you are not stuck with chronic pain. From what we've learned, this is a bold statement. I think my mentor, Dr. Dave Boylan, would be proud of me. And people with chronic pain, they may be challenged by it, but I'm willing to say this boldly. What we've learned from neuroplasticity is that chronic pain is now a choice. If you want to be stuck with chronic pain the rest of your life, that is a choice that you are making because you do not need to be stuck with it. So bold statement. I
want to like snap like snaps for agreement because it's just so true. And I think that that's one of our greatest desires within our work at Hope Not Nope is to get people to believe this about themselves. And I mentioned freedom earlier, but it's the same thing with this. Like, we desire your freedom from these preconceived ideas of you having to be this certain way, you know? And it's so unfortunate because I know that there's people listening who are in their car or in their small town or in their home and they're like, oh, I'm stuck like this, or they're just like discouraged, don't have fulfillment, they don't have meaningful activity, and they're like, I just feel stuck with this. And they're actually challenged by what we're saying right now because they don't see another option. But heck, if you're listening to this right now, that is the first step of the next option. Like, the new option for you is, if you're allowing yourself to take whether you're listening to just this question, which will be posted on YouTube and it's 10 minutes or whatever, or you're listening to the whole podcast, or you're listening to every episode of our podcast, like that is a step in the right direction. Not that we're the greatest thing since sliced bread by any means, but like our desire is pure, and the research that we're giving is also like credible research, and that we're doing our best to give you, not out of our own agenda, but out of the belief that you're worthy of the best life possible. You're worthy of not being stuck in whatever situation you're in. You can get out of the chronic pain. You can get out of, abusive situations, or even abusive like mindsets that you have if you're verbally abusing yourself all the time because you think that that's what you do because maybe your mom was that exact same way to herself. Like there's all these things that you think like, oh, I have to be this way because I was raised this way, or that's what Italians do, or whatever your heritage is from, or whatever. And it's just not true. Like you don't have to stay in that environment or in that headspace or in that whatever. Like you do have the ability to change a life. So change a life.
There might be people listening that stop listening after that statement because they're like, oh, you think I'm making the choice to have this chronic pain? You think I'm making the choice to live in this discomfort? And I could see why you'd be challenged by that and why you might stop listening. And if that's you, I want you to know that we still love you and that we're here for you when you decide that you do want to make that change. And again, like Brandon said, this is modern research. And by modern, we're a good 30 years into it now.
Modern.
It's pretty wild. I actually got a text the other day from a dear friend of mine that on the news, they finally reported that your ACL can heal itself within 3 months. And that in this research study, 80% of the people had that.
Wow.
And it was on the news, and she took a picture and she texted it to me and she goes, well, you've only been saying this for about 8 years now. I'm like, yeah, because this is when the research comes out. But then for it to get to the mainstream, it takes so long because the media doesn't want to cover it because it's not as entertaining.
It's not spicy
enough. It's
enough.
not spicy enough. Yeah. So it tends to kind of get swept under the carpet. And then people will go, well, I need case studies. I need to see case studies. Like, no, there's reviews. There's meta-analysis. The systematic reviews from like these peer-reviewed journals showing these things now. You don't need the case studies. They've been done. There's plenty of books that have the case studies in there. If you want to live the life of hope and get rid of the nope, then let's do it.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, just to repeat what you're saying, like case studies are not the answer. And I think that a lot of people are like, oh, it's a case study. Like these are real people. It's trustworthy. No, it's trash. Sorry, but it's trash. Like go to peer-reviewed research that is quality and not clickbaity, but we could go on a tangent about that. If you want us to, ask us a specific question regarding that.
And the last thing I'll say is like, if you're ready to take those steps and it's not with us, that's fine. Like that's great. Like our goal is that you get fired up and are excited to take those steps. But as you take those steps, be careful because when a lot of people become really uncertain with these harder types of conditions, whether it's Alzheimer's, whether it's chronic pain, whatever it may be, they get a little bit desperate and they start going to things in the wellness space that have even less evidence that they would be using in a traditional medicine approach, right? Because what we see from the research is that a lot of different things will make you feel a little bit better in the short term, and a lot of those things are because you believe that they're going to make you better, which is known as a placebo. I shall please
say that.
But it's because you put your faith in this thing, right? So the question that we pose is like, well, what would happen if we didn't have to rely on all these other things to change the way that you feel, think, and predict your outputs to be? What if you were able to be empowered with the science and with solutions to really work through these things? And you know what? It might take a little bit longer than going to get a foot bath, or I'm trying to think of other examples, but I don't want to open up too many cans of worms. But
the like saltwater pill or whatever,
or saltwater pills, like You can take those things, right? But is that really leading to healing, or is that leading to you believing in something again that is leading to a very short-term response, but you need to keep taking it throughout your life, versus learning that, wow, my body was made to digest, it was made to filter, it was made to absorb, it was made to become resilient, it was made to fight off infections, it was made to feel good. Like, it wasn't made to be in this chronic pain state, and you can get out of it. So just, if it's not with us, that's completely fine. Just please make sure that you're with a trusted provider, that they might be old, adding their own flair into it, their own different spices, but make sure the recipe is based off science. You want to try a little black pepper, a little salt here and there, that's fine, but make sure that the recipe itself is good, right? Like, Italian, you're making pasta sauce, like, let's not try to make it out of mustard.
Yeah.
Like, let's use a tomato base. So make sure you're using a tomato based solution. That's my analogy for the day.
Perfect. Let's hop into our next question.
Perfect.
This is from Antonio. I recently heard stretching is pointless. Should I keep stretching or not worry about it anymore?
Antonio, I love that question. I'm sure that you're excited about the pasta conversation that we just had. So is stretching pointless? Should you not worry about it anymore? Classic answer, it depends. It depends. But here's the thing, static stretching. So static stretching would be what you would think of as the old school stretching. Think of leaning over to touch your toes, keep your legs straight, and just stay in that position for 30 seconds. The whole team counts it out, and then I get fired up when we go to games and we see teams still static stretching before the games. But anyway, like, static stretching is being questioned to be retired as a component of physical activity for a lot of reasons. But one reason being is that your muscles and tendons don't change from static stretching. What changes is your sensory nervous system. And there's research from Peter Magnuson and Welper that have followed this for years now and have showed that, yeah, you're just changing your toleration because of the sensory system. And if your goal is to improve range of motion, static stretching can do that, right? Like, there's nothing against that. If you're a gymnast and you need to get your knee up towards your head, or a performing artist and you need to be able to do full splits, you probably need some static stretching. But at the same time, the question then becomes, is there a way to improve that range of motion while also changing the muscle and tendon, so that the more stretchy that we get, we're also keeping stability? And the research has shown, yeah, there's a way to do that, and it's through eccentric strengthening and lengthening. So that has become a much better approach to improve range of motion and keep a level of strength that is needed to do these higher level activities. The other component of this is that when we say stretching, if it's dynamic stretching and dynamic mobility is a great warm-up before getting into an activity. Static stretching might be a good cool down, right? It's like the end of your workout and you're just exhausted and you just want to kind of open up some areas, and you understand that it's not changing the muscle or the tendon, it's just working on the sensory system, it's working on the fascial tissue. Why not do it if you have the time? But don't spend your time doing a 30-minute static stretching program when you could be doing other things that'll lead to better health markers, right? So it's not that you shouldn't be doing it. If you're crunched for time, then take it off the list. It's not needed. If you enjoy it and you want it to be a part of your workout or part of your movement routine, awesome. Just do it in the cool down instead of the warm up. So if you're going to keep stretching, just be intentional of when you're doing it, why you're doing it, and understanding that, if you have tight hamstrings, static stretching is probably not going to get you to where you want to be long term. Eccentric strengthening could get you there. Pelvic control could get you there. Getting rid of some fear, getting rid of some muscle guarding will get you there.
Yeah.
So just be intentional of why you're doing it. And if you're a coach or you know coaches or anything like that, and you're static stretching before you're going out onto the field or on the court, please stop. Please just don't do that anymore. Like, the research isn't there. Dynamic mobility will go so much further. The programs that I've worked with, I've been so excited because I've gotten there, and their warm-ups have been awesome.
Mm.
They've been so good. And I'm just like, wow. And guess what? The coach is older, like retired from his normal job, and just keeps coaching because the guy loves it.
Mm-hmm.
So he keeps coaching. And people, well, it's old school. This is what we do. Well, how come this old school coach is using new methods? Because he actually cares enough to keep up with stuff.
Right.
Like, sorry if that's
Yeah, it's fine to be
insulting or
direct.
saucy, but it's true.
It's
like,
just direct.
don't set up our kids for failure because you didn't do your job at asking the question
Mm-hmm.
or seeking the stuff out on your own. Because you can do a quick Google search. Should I static stretch before a game? And you're going to get a lot of articles that will tell you no. And if you want the real research, Magnuson and Welper,
Mm-hmm.
follow them. Great stuff.
Well, I was thinking too, back when I was in high school, so 10 years ago, I feel like 10, 15 years ago, if we start early high school, that was around the time that there were some like some gym classes, like 1 year would be static stretching and then it would change. And I remember like being later in high school before, basketball practice or whatever, in gym class we would start doing dynamic stretching. And I never like understood why, but it's funny because that was again over 10 years ago. And recently, like I remember recently we were at a football game and they came out after halftime and one team was dynamic stretching and one team was static stretching. And I was like, since when do we still do static stretching in that specific situation? Because they were in the middle of a football game coming out after halftime.
Right.
And I don't know, not that coach is a bad coach by any means, but like just do what's best for the kids. And that is not static stretching if you're specifically doing the game, like in the middle of a game or what have you.
Right. Exactly. Serve your players,
Mm-hmm.
follow what's coming out. And again, right, there's a lot of different debates. There's a lot of things. Should I change this? Should I not change this? There's a lot to take in. And the reason I started this off with by saying it's being questioned to be retired as a component of physical activities to paint the picture of how useless it really is.
Yeah.
Unless you are a gymnast and you need that little extra at the end of a workout to get to where you want to be, and you're doing the other things, right?
What about, and I hope I don't offend a listener because I'm not that familiar, but what about something like yoga? Like yoga is kind of stretchy, right? But there's movement within yoga, so that wouldn't count as static stretching, right?
Yeah, so let me say it this way. Yoga takes a lot of flexibility in the body, but the flexibility in the body comes from the flexibility within the brain. I stay away from yoga classes because I disrupt them, because they get into positions
like, oh,
that are super challenging and that you have to hold for a while. But know that the positions that you're holding are challenging to your core. They're challenging to your breathing. So you're still getting a lot of dynamic stability and training and other components of it that you wouldn't get with just a static stretch.
Sure.
So I don't think you offended any of the yogis out there. I think they're probably excited because they're like, yes, like you kind of get it. And it's like, thank you for not coming to the class and disrupting us with your noises. Because, oh man, you can squat all this way, deadlift all this way, handstand push-ups. I get in a yoga class and the instructors, we're in a down dog. Like, all right, we're going to hold this for 3 minutes. Like, use your core, engage your shoulders, find your ground, breathe. I'm trying to breathe. I can't breathe as I'm doing this. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry for the people that wanted the quietness. So I just I do my own yoga, quote unquote, after workouts. But it's there's a lot more to yoga than just like holding a stretch position.
Sure.
There's a lot of mindfulness, a lot of
grounding,
a lot of stability that the body takes on.
Love that. Just a little side question in the midst of that.
Yeah.
But, Eli, Allison, Antonio, we hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for asking the questions. And listeners, please send in your questions at hopenotnope.org. I really think that this episode was about freedom. It was about encouraging one another and living in truth. And I don't think that's a bad thing to have an episode about. So we hope that you enjoyed it.
Not at all. Thank you for those questions. Have a great week. And remember, every day is not just a day to be hopeful. It's an opportunity to become hope. And we're going to end with a fist bump. Boom.